Hi, I'm agronomist Greg Phillips, and welcome to my YouTube channel. If you've seen my other videos, you know my channel is based on two different types of videos, or at least we have two different types of videos. One are fairly quick shorts that just give you the information you need in order to maintain your yard. Others are going to be more in depth, and I may do an in-depth one on irrigation and soil textures and soil water holding capacity. But today we're just going to talk about irrigation and how do we know when to irrigate. How do we know how much we're putting out? How do we place our sprinklers out in our yard? What prevents maybe summer dormancy or keeps grass alive when we have the very lean times during the year? We're going to talk about a little bit about hand watering and a little bit about evaporative cooling. So anyway, when do we start watering? I really thought about how to do this and how to explain this in a way that makes the most sense to you. I can get into soil textural class, I can get into evapotranspiration, I can all these scientific calculations and things, and obviously you don't want to deal with that. So I was trying to think of the best way to do it, and I found it. This is actually in the flower pot, and I'll kind of hold it up here. This is an old school, probably I bought at a co-op or something. It's a tensiometer. Forgot to explain what a tensiometer was. Tensiometer measures the amount of tension of the water in the soil. The higher the tension, the less available water there is. The lower the tension, the more water is available in the soil. So there'll be a little meter on there that goes from the one I showed you, actually this one. You'll see it goes from dry to wet. I just pulled this out, so it went back down to dry. But that gives you an idea. Obviously, if it's moist, you don't have to water. If it's dry, you need to water. So that's a tensiometer, essentially what it is. And you can get these, I think you can get these in Walmart. And they're actually not bad. They're not a scientific instrument that's dialed in. I saw these when I was in college, some of these more expensive ones that you actually put into the ground. But these actually don't do a bad job. So what you want to do is sometime, I'm in the mid-Atlantic region, really start watering home lawns, start looking at home lawns after Father's Day, definitely after Independence Day, but folks further south, it's going to be a little earlier. Folks further north, going to be a little later. But you're probably going to have a pretty good feel when to go out, get these soil tensiometers. I would put one in a spot that has always been a bad spot for you as far as water for the year. I get three of them. I put another one in a spot that's sort of in between, that generally is a pretty good spot, and then I put it in a wet spot. And that gives you an idea of approximately when you need to water and where you need to water. Because we don't want to overwater an area, particularly because it's going to lend itself to more fungal pressure if we overwater an area. Get into hand watering our bad spots here in a little bit. So anyway, I have a video on placement of your irrigation heads. Okay, sprinkler head placement. Let's say you had a sprinkler head here. Here's the soil surface, and that sprinkler shoots in an arc from the sprinkler itself out. Okay. Now, if you were to see the distribution of water from this irrigation head as it pertains to the amount of water in the soil, it would look something like this. The most water from that irrigation head would be right at it. The least amount of water that actually makes it into the soil would be at the very least out here at the end of the arc. So the total amount of water that actually gets into the soil would look something like this. The most at this sprinkler head, the least at the end of the arc. So in order to ensure that you have proper distribution, you need to put your irrigation heads at the end of the arc of the other, so that one irrigation head's arc just makes it to the next, and the next makes it to the other. So your distribution from those irrigation heads, all of these three working together, this one here, this one here, creates a uniformity within the soil profile of this. On these irrigation heads that you have, these adjustable ones that go half circle, quarter circle, what have you, and generally they go, and there's a mechanism that makes it go back and forth the other way, back and forth. You know, there's no sense in you mowing the neighbor's yard, or pardon me, watering the neighbor's yard, right? You could put this on the very edge and put it on a half circle. Or if you put it on the corner of the yard, let's say you have your road and then the neighbor's yard next door, you could put it on a quarter turn, and in that way you're only, you know, that's a lot of water going in your neighbor's yard. You may be friendly, want to water his yard, but you don't want to water the asphalt, the road, and you obviously don't want to spray somebody's car either. But just be aware that irrigation, if you're half circle, you only got around for half the time. If it's a quarter circle, you only got around it for a quarter of the time. So just be aware of that. Okay, so now we've placed our irrigation heads. A few things. We oftentimes think about, or when we talk about irrigating, we say, oh, well, we put 5 minutes out, we put 10 minutes out, or 20 minutes out, or whatever. And it really doesn't tell us exactly how much water we've actually put out. And general rule of thumb, particularly during June, July, you're probably going to need, in order to prevent summer dormancy, you're probably going to need at least a quarter inch every day. So if you get a rainstorm, let's say on Monday, you get a half inch of rain, you probably got a couple of days before you have to start thinking about irrigating again, unless it's extremely hot. Then you may have to only go 2 days. So now, how do we know how much to put out? Now what we'll do is we will take a clear glass container, and where our 2 irrigation heads are, we want to put that right in the middle of those 2 irrigation heads. And the longer you run it, the more accurate you're going to be. Generally, I run them for about 20 minutes and keep that cup out there. Do it on the day, preferably very early in the morning. I'll get more to irrigation timing in a minute. We're talking about how much we're putting out right now. Do it very early in the morning when there's very little wind, and run it for, I recommend there 20 minutes. Multiply that times 3, that's how much water you're getting per hour. Or divide it by 2, and that's how much water you get in 10 minutes. Probably when we irrigate, we're probably going to need at least a quarter inch of water each time we irrigate. I know that can get expensive for some folks, but if you want to really dial in your grass and keep it from summer dormancy, you're probably going to need that much on days that it doesn't rain. Now, as far as timers, I really like these digital timers. And the nice thing about these is there's actually 2 stations on this. When you have an irrigation sprinkler, really, because it's a 3/4 inch hose, you're really only going to be able to run 2 sprinkler heads, homeowner sprinkler heads, off of that 3/4 inch hose. If not, your uniformity is not going to be there. So what you would do, you would run one hose out to no more than 2 sprinkler heads. Run this one out to no more than 2 sprinkler heads. That will give you 4 sprinkler heads. And that should cover most of your front yard at least. It's going to be a little labor intensive if you have to move things around. Now, some of you may have an automated system. They'll probably also, in that automated system, if you had commercially installed, they'll probably have you a timer set up, and you'll know exactly how much to put out. But just, you know, the thing about irrigation is this: you can get really deep into the weeds of doing this, and it can get very costly with water. What really, from a homeowner standpoint, what we need to consider is, one, are we really going to make that big of an investment in water and that much time into putting out sprinkler heads? If you're willing to do it, go do it. But I'm trying to give you some guidance on how to do it properly, so you can at least get the expectations that you want. So anyway, we know how much we're putting out. We have our timer. We've made sure that we don't run any more irrigation heads than what we have. So about a quarter inch will keep you out of summer dormancy in extreme conditions. And usually after a significant rain, you're going to need about a quarter inch of water every day for that plant. So when you get, let's say you get a half inch of rain, you're probably going to have 2 or 3 days. There again, you can look in your tensiometers, you know how much to put out. I'd put out at least a quarter inch a night if it doesn't rain. Now, as far as summer dormancy, we hear that a lot. And I've had some luck with summer dormancy, for lack of a better word, of grass recovering after it's really brown. Some of the heat dome, this is 2023, if this is, this is some of the heat that we are seeing in this year in Texas and out west. Granted, it's probably warm season grasses, but there's also, in Oregon, as I understand it, they've also had some triple digits as well. To prevent death from summer dormancy, I looked it up, University at Michigan State, pretty sharp folks up there at Michigan State. What they recommended was putting a ½ inch of water out every 2 to 3 weeks. Now that is on your entire lawn to prevent death of your grass. Because what happens is during these times of extreme drought, the water does leave, the plant starts shutting down, the water leaves, the plant says, uh-oh, I'm in trouble, stops putting water up into the leaves, okay? And that crown, which is right on the soil surface, the plant puts all of its resources in making sure that crown makes it through this tough time. And if you put out about a ½ inch of water every 2 to 3 weeks, I'd generally say about 2 weeks on your entire lawn, you have a very good possibility of making it into September, into October, and that grass recovers from summer dormancy. So that's fairly important. Now I have a bee. There we go. Now, so that should help you with your irrigation needs. Let's talk about hand watering for a minute. Hand watering generally on spots. You're going to be hand watering your spots that are probably going to be on a hill, south-facing slopes, where the prevailing wind is coming from. High spots on your yard. We do it quite a bit in golf courses. That prevents them from going into inner summer dormancy. That is, one thing where you have the tensiometers in the bad spots of your yard. When we want to hand water, ideally, and I know most of you are going to be at work, ideally we want to probably do that about 10 o'clock in the morning. That allows the plant to get the water. We want to water reasonably slowly, okay? We don't want to saturate it, have it run off. You want to make sure it's infiltrating the soil, because there's a hydrophobic condition that can happen sometimes during the summer months. And you want to do a good soak. And it is going to be there a while, and you really need to get it to where it's almost squishy. That'll get it through the day, because there's a lot of evapotranspiration going on in that spot, particularly evaporation if it's a prevailing wind, south-facing slope. Those are going to be the toughies. Around asphalt, where you have heat coming off, and there's an excessive amount of heat in that particular area, I've seen grass want to go into summer dormancy there. So keep that in mind. As far as evaporative cooling of grass, we do this sometimes in golf courses. And I've done this to a decent amount of success. Evaporative cooling is basically putting a little bit of water on the grass and allowing it to evaporate off. And as it evaporates off, it also takes the heat off. That's not going to do you a whole lot good on a day that's 100 degrees and you go out there. It generally lasts about 15, 20 minutes during the heat of the day. But where I've seen it been most effective is doing it in the very late afternoon. And I stress the word afternoon. What you want to do is, just before the sun goes down, maybe a little bit even before the sun goes down, you go out there and you do just an evaporative cool on your grass, okay? We want to do that, and you gotta maybe use your judgment. We want to do it at a time that gives it enough time during the day to where that turf canopy dries out. We want to get it cooled down, okay, and where the sun is low enough in the sky to where it's not beating down on it like it was at 2 o'clock, and that cools that grass down and allows it to, what it does is it gives you several more hours to recover from the day. Instead of that cooling down and taking maybe, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock at night before it starts that recovery process, you're actually starting that recovery process 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night, maybe 7. It gives it a few more hours to recover from the day. I've seen pretty good responses to that, particularly when I had greens in North Carolina and that heat was just banging away at it. I know that seems labor intensive, but if some of you really have a very high expectation in your grass, that's one of the techniques you can use. Now let's talk about wetting agents. This is something that maybe homeowners aren't familiar with, and I used them to great success on golf courses, particularly on golf course greens. And you can find them on Amazon. You can type in wetting agents and you can find any of them. I don't know if one is much better than the other. I have not used a whole lot of wetting agents. There's a couple different types. In golf courses, we used a product called Cascade, which actually lasts for about a month. Another product, which you put out about every 7 days, it was called a primer, is what I recall it. And you put it out every 7 days on the grass. What it does is it breaks down a little bit of the adhesive and cohesive forces and a lot of the hydrophobic nature of the soil when it gets really, really dry and really, really hot during the summer, and allows infiltration of the water, and it evens out where the water actually is in the soil. It evens it out to where your bad spots, your localized dry spots, are not as prevalent, because it allows that soil to dry out more evenly. And I have used that on golf greens. I'm talking to the really high-end guys here. And I've actually used it on my yard a little bit in an experiment, and it does work very well. But just remember the two types, the ones you put out every 7 days and the ones you put out every month. Just one thing, do be careful. I would put them out according to the label. Generally, they need to be watered in, because what you can do, if you put it on the grass when it's really hot, it causes a phytotoxicity. It doesn't kill the grass, but it turns yellow. It's kind of like a sunburn on the grass. So I would put that out in the evening on your grass and follow the label instructions. A lot of them don't require it to be watered in. Some of them do. Just be sure to follow the label. So hopefully that helps you with the irrigation. There again, you need to find out how much you're putting out. Be sure your irrigation heads or your sprinklers are evenly placed, and that you are putting out, with maybe a tensiometer's help, of proper timing of the irrigation. So if you have any more questions, please put something in the comments. And if you like this video, please like. And if you want to, subscribe to the channel and you'll get more updates as I post more videos. So I hope this was helpful, and I hope my future ones will be too. I'm agronomist Greg Phillips. Thanks.